Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Reignite Your Soul Podcast. I'm your host, PLAHUTA, and on this podcast, we are opening our hearts, expanding our minds to embody an entirely new way of being. And today we have Anthony Strayhorn here with us, who is the founder of Stray from the Norm. He has a background actually in chemical engineering, and he is a certified personal trainer and also an amazing coach. And he's a Your Day transformation coach. And with that, he has a program called the 2D Independence Coaching Program. And overall, he's just an epic human. So today we came on here to chat a little bit more about codependency. So if you're somebody who has been having some struggles or challenges in relationships, in any area, whether it's relationship, intimate relationships with friends, with family, with coworkers, anything like that, I know there's lots of programming around our relationship dynamics. So I'm very excited to have you here, Anthony, to have a amazing conversation about this, where we can really have people to have more tools and understanding around the topic so that they can navigate their relationships with more ease. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
You're welcome. I know it's been a while. For those of you who have been following the podcast for maybe like at least 2 or 3 years, then maybe you've seen the previous episode with Anthony, which I will link the episode in the comments for people who want to kind of see the very first episode that we did a few years ago, where he shares a little bit more about his story and his background and his personal business of straying from the norm, getting out of your comfort zone. But today we're going to dive into codependency. So without further ado, Anthony, would you mind just sharing like a little bit more about what codependency is and like what that looks like for people?
Yeah. So codependency a lot of times is this addiction, this feeling like I have to, I feel happy. I have to help someone else at the expense of my health, at the
Mm-hmm.
expense of my own sense of self-worth, my happiness, my position in life. And oftentimes how it shows up is that you feel like your sense of your life unfolding is affected by and is a function of somebody else's choices towards you, what they say to you. It could be a job, it could be a collective of people, it could be something at large like a government.
Mm-hmm.
And so you tend to make your own sense of self identity depending on something external to you.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a multitude of symptoms that can come with that kind of dynamic that develops. And oftentimes your health suffers as a result of this kind of dynamic,
Mm-hmm.
mentally, emotionally, socially, spiritually, physically.
Mm-hmm.
That's just kind of like a general overview way of it. I do want to preface that I'm not a therapist. So my context is not going to come from a therapy-centered approach. It's going to come more from a therapeutic coaching approach.
Amazing.
So, because therapists often do work with people in a at a much deeper level that allows people to process deeper, unearthed thoughts and emotions that I don't have training for,
Mm-hmm.
and I do know therapists that do that. So, um, yeah.
That's perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
And so what are some of the ways that that can kind of show up for people? Like, how would somebody know if they're in a codependent relationship?
Yes, great. Because actually, in our program, we see a lot of the same patterns. So, some of the things that I oftentimes see all the time is this: putting someone else's needs, whether it's your child, your husband, your coworker, your grandparents, you put someone else's needs at the top of the list consistently.
Mm-hmm.
You're always last to eat, so to speak. You're
Yeah.
always last to give yourself the permission to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that it commonly looks like is that you don't value taking care of your health, meaning like you don't take yourself out any kind of self-care um, date. There is no kind of like ritual or behavior around that.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times how that plays out is that the conversation is in your head is like, I'm not, I can't do this unless everybody else is taken care of, or this scenario, the situation looks like this before I can do that. Like you don't believe you're not validated.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, you're not validated until this happens, until this
Yeah.
happens. So that till this happens is outside of you.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge pattern. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's very common, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, it's wild because it's like so normal.
Yeah, it's normalized. Highly
It's so
normalized.
normal, like to have that happen. And in
Mhm,
my relationship that ended like 6 or 7 years ago, that really took me on this personal development journey. That's like exactly what it was.
mhm,
Textbook. And I hadn't even heard of like codependency before or like anything like that. I was just doing what I knew how to do.
mhm.
Right. And it was so much like always being putting myself last, and it caused a lot of like emotional turmoil and burnout and lashing out on my partner and like a lot of control and
Mhm.
everything like that. And the relationship obviously ended, and
Yeah.
then kind of went on this big like awakening and spiritual journey and personal development journey, and like been working to shift all of those patterns. But like the people pleasing and like those things can be so ingrained into who we are that we actually don't even know that there's something else out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a way of like the people pleasing or putting other people first, or um, feeling like you're not, like I said, worthy of actually getting support.
Yeah.
This is another one too. Another one is like receiving support, receiving
Mm-hmm.
help.
Yeah,
Like I'm not supposed to receive that. I'm not supposed to receive help because I'm the one giving help.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And I definitely can't take time off, because if I take time off, this whole thing collapses.
Right? Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's that. So there's a lot of the our own power, our own sense of identity is given to everything else outside of us.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a think about like a bank, there's withdrawals and deposits. There's a consistent amount of withdrawals
No
versus
deposits.
no deposits.
Damn
There's,
it.
there's no pouring back into yourself,
Yeah.
right?
That's a great analogy. I love that.
Yeah, so it's think about it like that. It's like you can't build value, self-worth, or value if
Yeah.
you're always pulling money out of it. It's like a stock gets
Mm-hmm.
value by shares
Mm-hmm.
from different shareholders. The more
Mm-hmm.
shareholders, just imagine you're the stock and the shareholder at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
You're not putting money into the stock or fund, people that know the language of stocks and bonds and stock market. If you're not pouring into it, it can't grow.
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is, or it
Yeah.
doesn't do anything. So it's
Mm-hmm.
the same way. It's like we pour into ourselves, and as we do that, we become more filled,
Mm-hmm.
and we become more full,
Mm-hmm.
and we become more fulfilled. And
Then
so
the
that's
magic happens.
in the magic can unfold. That's a,
Yeah.
that's a that's like a prerequisite. All right, prerequisite. It's an ingredient for magic, is to feel that, you know, that sense of like fulfillment inside.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes in the codependent arrangement or relationship, you don't feel that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when all else around the world or outside of me is doing this. And it's also a high level of blaming too, Laura. I hear
Yeah.
that someone did this to me. This happened to this years ago. So you're constantly waiting to be told what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't trust your own voice. You don't trust your own inner direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's common. I've seen that very common in codependent relationship.
Yeah,
So
very common. And can you just explain to people where that comes from? Because maybe there's people like that are listening and they're like, oh my gosh, this is like exactly where I'm at right now. And I'm kind of like in this rough spot. And there could be that like kind of shame of being like, oh shit, like, like now I'm
mhm.
screwed. My relationships are never going to get better, all of these things, but it's so not true. But like, if you could just explain to people like where it comes from and why we end up in these situations. Obviously, like I shared that I was in that and I got out of it. So there's hope, people. Don't worry. And we'll get more into that as well. But would you be able to share that?
Yeah, a lot. Well, I'll just say one common source of a lot of this is old childhood programming that
Yeah.
we got from the behaviors we observed with our children, from our as children from our parents, early childhood, teenage relationships too. You know, and when we first started going to the formative understandings of what a relationship is, and we started trying and experimenting with being in a relationship, having a boyfriend, having a girlfriend, so we oftentimes have like been building on this programming for years. And at some point it sometimes hits a head, or it hits a point where we conflict very deeply with somebody. And so that could be a lot of times a source of it. And oftentimes too, media portrays a lot of subliminal messages that we don't think about consciously, that can reinforce and reactivate a lot of that programming.
Crazy, eh?
Yeah. And I will say, it's just a moment in time, right? So when people are thinking like, what can I do? I don't know. What you're experiencing is just a moment. It's not the sum total story of your life. And I do feel and believe that we are on a continuum of growth, and that this stage that you might feel all of this stuff that feels like shit, or feels like I'm climbing out of a hole every single day, it's just a moment. Like, it will pass. And just continue to listen to your inner voice. I know it's hard because some people are like, I don't know if I can listen to myself. It's a practice. Get around people who are doing that. Like, or find a podcast episode or a clip somewhere where people are talking about it.
Go down the wormholes.
Wormholes, because it's all like little by little, like leading you down the path. Allow yourself to feel, to be open and feel that drawing you closer to that new experience. So
yeah, no, I love that. That's amazing advice. It really is, because when you look back, you're like following the dots. You're like, that's why that happened. Okay. And then we stumble upon this podcast, and then we learn this, and then we shift this, and then we start like, literally, it's like, I can't remember when it was, before we met, but I would keep saying to myself, I'm like, life just keeps getting better and better. And I would just keep saying that to myself. I was like, life just keeps getting better and better. And so it did. It was one of those things that I kind of started saying to myself. And it's so true, even in relationships, because relationships are like literally like one of the most intense and like prevalent personal development programs we'll ever go through, if you actually see them for that, which I think for me, like, I really do see it now after everything I've kind of learned with that. Like, I really do. Very self-aware of myself and like other people, and it's like being able to use it as that, and always like honing back into myself and how I can shift in situations has been like game changer for relationships.
For sure. Yeah, the relationships are the opportunity grounds. They're the practice mats.
They're
fields of where we get to put our information into integrated embodiment. So it's where you build a muscle, or you put the vehicle, your body vehicle, on the road of life, and you test it and see what tweaks and adjustments you want to make, whether it be beliefs, values, your environments, what you put into your body, what you eat. So it's a plethora of things that we can examine and look at over time.
Sure, yeah. And so for people that are kind of in that, Anthony, like, what are some things that they can kind of start doing in order to call their power back and really start shifting the dynamic of their relationships and getting out of this kind of cycle that they're in?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I do in my coaching program is to give them very easy approaches to pouring back into themselves. So, habits. Small little changes in their habits, where they actually take a break away from their job, their everyday roles, or their tasks, and take a moment to pour in themselves. And that could look like, okay, take yourself out for a walk, go do a stretch, cook a meal for yourself, read a book, take a nap, call someone that you really enjoy talking to. So all those are like what we call deposits, additions to themselves. And what it does, it helps them start to feel more valuable because they're pouring into themselves. And it also just helps to, it energetically just puts them more into a different space of like thinking outwardly and thinking more inwardly. It doesn't mean that they don't have that at all. It's just that we kind of slowly shift the cruise ship, Laura, a little bit, to a different direction, even if it's just 5 degrees. And I like to give this analogy of the cruise ship because most people don't realize that it takes so much time and energy and a team to really shift a cruise ship. Like I've been on a cruise ship, and if you want to make it, if it's like, oh, it's going straight, but they need you to go like 5 degrees west, it takes like forever to turn that direction.
Yeah.
So much like consistency, so much commitment, and it's just little bits. So what I do is I help to really guide them on simple, practical things that they can do on a daily, weekly basis that helps them slowly shift that ship in a slightly different direction.
Yeah, and that's that accountability for that too, I feel would be massive, because I know like it can be so easy to say, yes, I'm going to go do these things because they're such simple things. But knowing that like the habits that we have, like we're so ingrained into doing them that like in the first one, getting out of your comfort zone, right? Like we're so like used to being in this one loop that it takes the brain a little bit to then hop into the next loop so that we can start doing something that's going to shift us in a new direction.
Yeah, and it's a matter of having some system of accountability, some system of check-in. And so part of the program is a number of different check-in points for multiple coaches, because that's their team, that's helping steer the ship with them. They're in the driver's seat. We're not driving their ship. We're helping them guide their own ship.
Amazing.
Because once they understand that, they'll feel like when they build this sense of clarity and conviction about it, they courageously will start doing that more for themselves. Even in the face of circumstances, even when the stuff hits the fan, even when the ground's, trembling and things are going, awry, they're still able to be centered. Over, they start to practice it more and more, becomes a little bit more stable.
So. Amazing. And then what's on the other end of that? We've got codependency, then we've got, what's the next kind of like milestone of shifting out of that?
So they'll move into a more healthy space of independence for themselves. And what that looks like is like a high level of courage with making choices. All right. With a deeper, consistent pattern of listening to their intuitive voice. Okay. You also see a pattern of their health going up. They don't feel they're not as drained, they're not as tired. They might shift their weight might drop because they're not carrying the weight of people's expectations, their own internal judgments, their own guilt.
Do you find that that's common for people? Because I know you do the personal training as well. Do you feel like that's a common thing for people physically holding weight, that once they shift that, then they drop weight physically? Yeah, crazy, eh?
Because it's metaphysical. Everything we see in the physical is a energetic reflection of what is happening metaphysical. And even if you just change what you eat, there's still something beneath the eating part. Like the thing is, Laura, is like, do you have the awareness of what's going on? Because sometimes it's in the subconscious and we're not sure, like, why am I eating differently? It's like, well, I changed jobs. I'm happier at this new job now. Before I was at a job I really didn't like, so I used to eat a whole bunch of crap during lunch. But now I go to lunch and I get, wraps and salads and healthy sandwiches. I never even thought about it. And as a byproduct, I've dropped some pounds. It's like there are layers. There's layers to the shit. Excuse me. There's layers to it. You know what I mean? There's layers to the stuff of life. And so when you understand all that, you can you can tie it back to like everything is energy. Energy of the environment, the energy of their thoughts, the energy of what you eat, the energy of who you hang around, all has an impact on your physical.
And it's so much more like impactful. It's interesting because like in the traditional way, it's like they just focus on eating more salads, for example, even though that doesn't actually bring the results. But it's like if you're like focused on that, whereas if you just don't even focus on it, like you said, focus on that, you get to the root cause, and then naturally it will just unfold and you won't have to try. And that's why so many people like don't succeed with goals like physical health goals as well, is because they're not tapping into the underlying unconscious programs that are there too. So yeah, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's the part where we get to dig into the layers. There's parts of this journey of um, ourselves that we get to just dig some more. Because like
Mm-hmm.
you could work out and eat differently, and that could get you to a certain level. And it doesn't say it doesn't work.
Yeah,
It's just it may not last forever, or it
for
may not
sure. Yeah.
consistently keep creating the result. So you have to look at, well, maybe there's some other things. Doesn't mean
Yeah.
something's wrong or broken.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like there's a level of effectiveness that you've hit a threshold.
Yeah.
And so until you go past that threshold further with effectiveness, then your
Mm-hmm.
results may just stay the same.
Yeah. And then you could have something come up in your life that's more stressful, and then you naturally just revert back to old patterns. And
Mhm.
then you're then like completely off it again. And then it's like this loop of like being so good, and then something stressful happening, or something that you don't even really realize is stressful. But then it's like something at work happens, or your kids are acting up, or this or that. And then it kind of like loops you back into that, instead of
Yeah.
completely shifting out of it.
Yeah, and that's part of growing too. You're it's not that we don't go back to the loops, it's like do we minimize the time that we're back in it?
Mm-hmm.
We'll get
Yeah.
into it. It's just like instead of being 10 months, now it's only 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I was off for 2 weeks versus 10 months. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I was off for 2 weeks. Now I'm off. Before I was off 2 weeks. Now I'm only off like 2 days.
Yeah.
So it's like you're settling in more.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so your practice with your tools have
Mm-hmm.
become more refined. You're a high level of mastering your emotions,
Mm-hmm.
your thoughts, your
Yeah.
actions because of your awareness and your
Mm-hmm.
willingness and courage to like make those choices. Like this stops here,
Yeah.
stops here. All right. Oh, I was going there. All right, I can see myself going there, and that's okay. I understand. It's just part of it, and that slows it down. But as if you
Mm-hmm.
start beating yourself up, judging yourself, I shouldn't have been doing this. I've been practicing this for years. How can someone like me as a coach or this person or that, why am I still having these kind of experiences?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're immune to going through stuff again. Like that's not real. We all
Mm,
are. It's
for
just that
sure.
we don't,
Yeah.
people who are a little bit more masterful in certain areas just don't tend to be in those spaces as long. They kind of like
Mm-hmm.
go through it, experience it, and they move on.
Mm-hmm.
Or they don't allow that to drive the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Like we even as coaches, professionals, anybody that's in a high level of any kind of industry, we all go through stuff. It's just is that it's not driving it. It's we're managing it in a little bit of a more healthy and effective way, so it doesn't become all consuming
Mm-hmm.
of our
Mm-hmm.
life.
Yeah. It's
So
more like self-awareness around it, body awareness as to where you are in that cycle. And then you like allow yourself to move toward the resources, the tools, or the things that actually like help you to move through it. Yeah. And I love that you said that, Anthony, because I feel like there can be a lot of kind of like shame or self-blame that people put on themselves for kind of like going through these repetitive patterns. But it really is, it's like the way that I like to think about it is like if I'm looping through something, it's because I haven't learned something yet. It's
mm.
like life isn't going to let me pass. Like it's like a video game. Like life isn't going to let me pass this level until I actually learn everything I need to learn in that level so that I can get to that kind of
Yeah,
other side and that next level. And there's literally like lessons upon lessons upon lessons. That's literally why we're here. So if you want them to end, it's not going to happen.
yeah, and that's just that
Yeah,
version of the lesson, right? There's another
exactly.
version.
Yeah.
It's all about how we look at it. It's like if we embrace like, yeah, this is part of it. Like I'm not gonna get out of these lessons. I'm not,
Yeah.
and the lessons doesn't mean it's gonna come with pain and hardship and challenge. A lot of times they can come with like you supporting somebody through something.
Mm,
It doesn't always mean you're gonna be feeling the brunt of this. It's like maybe it's you supporting somebody or you talking with somebody and helping them and supporting them and guiding them and being a space holder for them. That's how it can
mm-hmm.
look too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then so from that, I guess like thinking from my own experience after kind of my relationship ended, I did go through that complete independent stage where I was
Mm.
just like doing all my self-care stuff, like traveling, doing all of this stuff. And like, it felt really great to be in that phase. And then once I started getting back out dating again, it was kind of like another holy shit moment. Because it's like, you kind of like, it was so long. I think it was like 4 or 5 years since I had like dated, because I just was kind of like on my own journey, building my business, doing all these things. And you get back into dating and you're just like, oh my God, like there were so many fears that were coming up, all of this past stuff from my past relationship. It was
Yeah.
absolutely insane. So what is like the kind of like the next phase after like the independence
Yeah.
kind of phase?
So a high level of social interaction is the interdependence experience, meaning that you take your experience of being independent and you plug into a bigger collective whole or circle, and
Mm,
you understand that the sum of the independent pieces is greater than the individual. So everybody coming together, everybody being in one uniformed or pouring is greater than the independent.
mm,
Everybody feeds off that in a healthy, sustainable way. So that interdependence is a
mm-hmm,
high level of what creates this synergy amongst parties and countries and communities and everybody.
mm-hmm.
So, and that takes a solid foundational, consistent independence
Yeah.
for you to be able to be in that. Because a lot of times that does come with like feeling confident enough, feeling consistent enough to then say, okay, I'm ready to be among other people, other peers, because I feel secure. I have a level
Mm-hmm,
of security that's high enough within myself where I don't,
mm-hmm.
the level, I'm not having a lot of sways of doubt coming into myself, my mind and body, so
Yeah. And so what does that look like for people? Like what does that look like in relationships then if people are kind of in this interdependent state?
yeah. So for example, two people that come together, they understand that they come into their relationship already complete, whole and complete.
Yay.
You're not, you're not, you're not my other half. I'm
Mm,
I'm my whole
yes. And
self.
that's something you hear so often, my other half.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
and you understand that together, you're one, this is the other person, you coming together, you create a exponential value of
Mm-hmm.
community. So it's not like 1 and 1 equals 2. It's like 1 and 1 creates 10. It's called exponential
Yeah.
math or exponential. It's also known in the coaching and therapy world as Gestalt, the
Oh,
Gestalt,
okay.
which is like the sum of the individual. So if it's 10 strings, right? You think 10 strings equals a sum or a product of 10, but
Mm-hmm.
actually equals 100.
Mm-hmm.
So 10 to the 10th power. So imagine that it's exponential. So it's not just that individual added together equals 10. It's like exponentially larger.
You fuel each other.
Feel each other on a much larger scale. So in a couple's relationship, both of them coming together or both people coming together creates a
Mm-hmm.
much larger expression, a much larger purpose
Mm-hmm.
than, and you see each other as like your own individual world as well too. You're
Mm-hmm.
not together now. We're all one world. No,
Time.
we're two
Yeah,
worlds
yeah.
coming together, creating a like the collective together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
you honor the differences, you honor the similarities, you value the differences, you value similarities. All those things is
Yeah.
all what shows up in that high level, healthy interdependence experience.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I think like it's so powerful. For anybody listening or watching, whether you're on YouTube or listening to the podcast, um, let us know in the comments what your biggest takeaway has been from everything that Anthony shared so far. I think it's so gold because I remember like back when I was like, I don't know, like 7, 8 years ago when I was kind of in the codependent relationships, I used to look at people that were just like glowing and like just like seemed so happy and they're in these amazing relationships. And it was always, and I think it was from stories that my dad used to say, but it was just like almost like people were just born that way. And I
Yeah.
wasn't, you know,
Mhm.
it was like you would look at them like they're like these mystical creatures.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right. But then it's like now understanding, like, and I hope that people can really see, regardless where you are on this kind of spectrum, like it's all just patterns that we have the power to be able to dive into and shift through and recreate our reality however the heck we want. And we can have these more abundant relationships with effort and work and learning new things and taking, like, having, like you said, having the courage to be able to like integrate these new things into who we are and how we feel and the way that we show up in relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll say that it really takes a community. It really takes a community, whether it's one other person or two other people.
Mm-hmm.
It takes more than just yourself to work on yourself or be with yourself, to have fun with yourself, play, to
Yeah.
experience this life. We need each other. We're designed to be in communion, to 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 build, to grow, to expand, to
Mm-hmm.
evolve. All that is, we are wired that way to be in those kinds of experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
for anyone that's going through, a relationship dynamic, call it in, call that into your life, that I'm seeking a community, I'm seeking a resource to help me with being accountable, being consistent, being committed, being open and authentic to myself, so that I then draw that more into my life.
Mm-hmm.
And that will totally have an impact on your sense of self-worth and security, and how you identify yourself in life in a very loving and powerful way. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, incredible. And so what has your journey been like with codependency? Like, are you open to sharing like a little bit more about kind of your relationship path and like what got you to where you are today and
yeah.
sharing all of this with everybody?
Yeah, so I will say my experience early on with that looked like I was looking for approval in very small, nuanced ways about whether or not I was actually good enough, or um,
Yeah.
I was being received in a way that validated who I am.
Mm,
That was more so as a teenager. So it was big. It showed up as like trying to be like overtly like attention seeking in a way.
mm,
It was
yeah.
subtle though, but now that I reflect back on it, I could see like, oh, it was like I had this codependency that I didn't call it that. I didn't have words for it.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was the experience that, I remember having at times.
Mm-hmm. What were some of the things you did like receive that kind of
Mhm.
attention? Like what were some
Yeah.
of the things
So,
you did?
mhm. So acting out, misbehaving, and also just like blaming other people for things that I just felt like was easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to blame somebody, or blame a system, to blame their environment, to
Mm-hmm.
blame other people for,
Mm-hmm.
you know, why I felt the way I felt. I used to have a cousin that used to tell me, he would just say stuff to me that wasn't very encouraging. And I would say, well, because he said it, maybe I can't do it. And then maybe I should just think about it differently. So my sense of worth, or my sense of potential, my sense of what could be was limited based on that guidance, that I took on, that I allowed myself to believe in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I worked through that, and a number of different things helped me shift from that space throughout the
Mm-hmm.
years. I can't say it's been one thing; it's been a
Totally.
number of things.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
the
And did
stuff.
you find that like your relationships kind of like over time just kind of evolved? Like you'd have one, you'd have a breakup, and then it was like the end of the world, but then you'd like kind of get back up, and then you'd go through another one, then you'd have another one. Like what's been your kind of experience when it comes to relationships?
Yeah, I definitely saw that. I definitely saw that evolution, like a silver lining, or a common thread.
Hmm.
And the more and more I just started to like pause and reflect in the relationships, I could start to catch certain little behavioral things that were coming up more and more.
Mm-hmm.
And so that helped to kind of like iron out the wrinkles, or iron out the areas of life that were not fleshed out, that were not being addressed. And more and more as I started to do more like internal personal development work, as I got older, I started to see those things a little bit more clearly.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's
so,
interesting. I like how you shared how like in the relationships you started like assessing things. I feel like it's almost like a subconscious thing where we've been so programmed that like having a relationship or being married is kind of like this like top tier kind of goal
yeah.
that like I feel like when you're in it, then you can maybe become very complacent because
Mhm.
you've made it now. Whereas like you're just so caught up in it because it was definitely like that for me in my relationship. It was a 6 year relationship and it was like at that point, I didn't even know what self-reflection was or self-awareness at that point. But looking back, I'm like, that was totally it. Like I was just so like tunnel visioned on what I was doing. And it was like I was so comfortable in the relationship. And I
Mhm.
didn't think that it was ever going to end
Mhm.
until it did, which obviously kind of shattered everything. But now it really is, it's like not like there's this feeling of like, oh, I've made it because there's a relationship there. It's like nothing really changes, but it's just like you're still so focused on what you're doing, but then learning to merge this kind of new person into your life in a healthy way. Because I know for me, I met Danny when I was in Colombia.
Mhm.
And then now we have Lily as well. So now it's like we're trying to like merge in Danny being here. And before I was so independent where I didn't really have anybody else to kind of like fully blend into my life. So now I'm kind of like in that phase of like learning how to like weave people in, but in a healthy way while still maintaining my stuff, which
Mhm.
can be challenging when other people um like maybe want you to do something, but then you have to say no. And then they like maybe get upset about it. And it's like, it's really hard to kind of navigate maintaining your own thing, but then having the communication between people to keep it as like a healthy dynamic. Like it's not easy.
No, no, it's not.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about relationships is like they're not meant to be. They're not easy. And they're also not, they don't have to be all hard. So it's like we don't, they don't, everything doesn't have to be hard all the time, and
Yeah.
everything isn't going to be easy all the time.
Yeah.
So it's like we're dancing between both of those different like experiences. And like
Hmm.
when we understand that it's going to be both at some point,
Yeah.
we can go and we can find peace sooner than later, or
Hmm.
no matter what it is, we can understand that we'll get to a peaceful space. I know this is how it feels now, and I know I'm gonna come back to my peace.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. What have been some of your biggest things that you've done that have kind of like increased your self-awareness or given you the ability to say, do those check-ins, like you had said, kind of while you're in the relationship?
Well, I will definitely say having my own time to like take care of my body, whether it be go on a retreat or
Hmm.
go on a hike or a bike ride or a walk, camping, as you know, most recently I did over the weekend, because
Hmm.
you really get to time to just like kind of like allow the noise or the distractions to kind of drop back a little bit. So you
Hmm.
can hear your own intuitive voice. You can hear your own thoughts a little bit more. They're
Hmm.
not as mixed in with other people's, energies.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean that those people are wrong or bad or all that. It's just you just get
Yes.
clear. You just get. It's like, is it easier to clean your house when everyone's there, or is it easier to clean it when no one's there? So
Hmm.
it's like that. But those have been practices I've done for years now to
Hmm.
allow myself to like reset, refresh, come back to all right, all right, a clearing. And it
Hmm.
brings a centeredness, Laura. Allows me to be more centered in myself when I can have that space for myself.
Hmm. Yeah. And then you actually have the ability to like make decisions confidently with what you're doing too. I
Yeah.
definitely noticed that, especially since like having Lily, like it's been 6 weeks now and I've been more cooped up. Like even the end of my pregnancy, been more cooped up than I normally would be. A lot because I was having like a lot of like back pain or I couldn't really walk very far or like all of
Yeah.
these things. And then the last 6 weeks, like healing up from the pregnancy, where I just got back out to yoga today. And oh
Mhm.
my gosh, like it made such a big difference going
Yeah.
to yoga again. And like that's one of my things that like really work well for me to get into that space where I'm clearing everybody else's energies out
Yeah.
because like I'm so empathetic and like can feel everything that like living in like a small apartment with people, it's like you're feeling everything all the time. So it can definitely be challenging of like knowing what's yours and what's not. So it's like so important that to get out and
Yeah.
have my own space to
For
really be able to clear that. Yeah. I know I think my things are yoga, nature, water is
Mhm.
always a big one. Like even if I just go in the bath or in the shower, it definitely helps me to like just like come back into
Sure.
myself so that I can make those kind of more clear decisions. That's actually where all my ideas come in, is in the shower.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because water is like a cleansing element.
Yeah.
Wind is too, but water helps like it wishes off
Mm-hmm.
energies that are no longer that you don't, you're trying to remove from your it
Yeah.
or and so more you can actually receive that universal download or those thoughts when that's cleared.
Yeah.
So
Totally.
makes sense.
Feel
I
it.
mean, yeah. And yeah, so that's that. I want to say this too, like where it's because we're talking about codependency.
Yeah.
There's a continuum, right? There's dependence, independence, interdependence. We all operate on some like on some space in it. It's not
Mm-hmm.
like we're 100% interdependent all the time
Yeah. Yeah.
or interdependent and independent. We all have some oscillation in that.
Like,
It's just like, yeah, where do you dance more in? And depending
mm-hmm.
on where you dance more in or where you find yourself at, you'll notice different symptoms, different
Mm-hmm.
results, different uh, patterns. You
Mm-hmm.
tend to be healthier, more vibrant, more energized when you're more independent to interdependent.
Mm-hmm.
When you're more dependent, you tend to feel more sluggish. You tend to feel more like a victim. You don't feel as creative. You
Mm-hmm.
feel less. You feel more limited. You feel like so. There's a different paradigm too that I want to really talk about. Like the way you see life is going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to create the experience. So just
Yeah.
understand that we're not all. There's no one person that's just all in one area and they're always on high vibe, always on that top of the mountain. Like that's we're always we're always surfing, dancing and on the whole experience. So
Mm-hmm. Totally. And I think too, with social media, people can have that perception a lot of the time that it's like you're only vibing up here all the time too. That's why I love like the podcast and the conversations, because you can actually like share stuff like this.
hmm
Because sometimes on social media you're just seeing like a highlight reel and it's like, oh my gosh, this person's living such an amazing life, which could be
yeah,
true, like, and it is. We all have those moments where we're feeling like super amazing, but everybody moves through it. Like you said, we all have these lessons to learn. So many lessons.
yeah, it's different flavors. Just think about it's like different flavors. We all had food that was all sweet all
Mhm.
the time. Like all of our food was sweet. It never had any salt, never had any, other flavors. That we'd be bored. That's the
Mhm.
paradox. Like we'd be bored if we didn't have any kind of like some kind of challenge, some kind of like predicaments to like figure out. You know,
Mhm.
it's just the way that the universe designed it perfectly
Yeah,
for us to like have contrast. When you have contrast, you can have perspective.
totally. Yeah.
You can reflect and like, all right, this was great. Okay, this was not the way didn't go how I thought it would go.
Mhm.
So, all right, there's a pause there, there's a moment to reflect and look at it and see the difference. And all right, now I can choose something different if I want to.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. I think it was in Joel's course. I don't even remember that, but he always said, "Oh, isn't that interesting?"
yeah.
Remember him saying that? I always say
Yeah,
that now. I'm like, "Oh, isn't that interesting?"
right.
You seem to be really moody right now. Oh, isn't that interesting? You're doing really great right now. But it really is
Yeah.
like that spectrum. And I love this conversation too, because it's like I'm kind of like I feel like I was doing great and then I kind of like regressing because I've been cooped up, and the winter in Canada. Oh my gosh. Like I'm definitely not cut out for winter. I know it's kind of like one of those things where it's like allowing your moods to go with
Mhm.
the seasons
Other-
and whatnot and slowing down. But like it's definitely affects my mood for sure. Like when
mhm,
it's not raining, because I love getting outside. Like
Sure.
when I'm underneath a roof, and sure you can get outside and stuff when it's snowing and stuff too, but I
Mhm.
love like being in the water and like the like nature as well. Like, and snow to me just doesn't really do it. But it also, with that awareness, I'm like, I don't really want to be in Canada for the winter.
Yeah.
So moving forward, once we get kind of the permanent resident stuff for my partner, we'll probably be hightailing out of here.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Find that equilibrium for yourself, that balance, that state.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So this has been an awesome conversation, because I feel like kind of going back to what I was just saying was that I kind of like went through that phase and then regressing, and now I'm kind of like coming back out of that hole,
hmm
and I'm like working my way back up now.
Yeah, I can dig it. Yeah, see, it's a dance, and and another way you can look at, like, we talk about the ebbs and flows. Like
Yeah.
if you look in the paradigm of like ebbs and flows going like that, but
Hmm.
if you like actually if you reframe that ebb and flow and turn it up, that ebb and flow goes like this, up.
Ah,
So it's not really what's the up and down. It's
yeah,
really just a
yeah.
dance, like a
It's like
sway.
a right and a left.
Yeah, right and left. That's it. It's not go to the side,
Totally. Yeah, yeah. I love
So
that.
it's just it's all perspective. Like there's a way I can look at ups and downs
Yeah.
or in a certain way, and it feels like the way you see it is how it can feel like, oh, I'm down.
Yeah.
Um, versus like, hey, this is Monday. Hey, this is Tuesday. Hey, Wednesday, Thursday. It's just like that's a perspective. Like that changes that can bring a whole other energy to like
Hmm.
life and the day and the week and the month and year. Like, oh, that's Wednesday. That was day. Is this you start to put less charge
Hmm.
of like judgment and just like
Hmm.
you just observe it. It's just like, oh, interesting.
Interesting.
It was
I seem to be here.
right, So
Totally, I love that. So
yeah,
any last words that you'd like to share kind of on anything that we just chatted about for anybody that's listening that you feel would be valuable?
you matter
Yay.
because you are made of matter.
There we go.
E- Even when you don't think you matter, you matter.
Still do. You still are it.
Can't get out of it. You can't get out of it. So accept
Love
that you
that.
matter because you are
Mhm.
matter. Isn't that great?
That's cool. I love it. I've never heard that before, but I do love it.
Yeah, So
Oh,
that's
that's awesome.
that's some wisdom, or that's some things.
That's perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on here and just sharing everything. I know I learned so much
Thank you.
throughout this episode as well. So thank you so much for being here, and to everybody that's watching or listening. If you do have comments to throw them in, send a big thank you to Anthony. And how is it that people can connect with you, Anthony?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram and Facebook mainly as like points of social media context or contact.
Mhm.
Um, Stray Fit, excuse me, Stray Fit dot lifestyle. I can't remember my handle.
Perfect. That's okay. We'll put it in the
In the
description.
comments. Yeah, yeah, Stray Fit dot lifestyle. And
Yeah.
yep. So that's mainly where I'm at.
Perfect. And then also you mentioned about a YouTube channel as well.
Yeah. So my YouTube channel is my group's YouTube channel. One second. I'm just gonna post it in the I'm gonna actually post it in the chat here, if that's
Cool.
cool. But actually you could just type in Your Day Balance Game, YOURDAY, Your Day Balance Game. So there's 3 words, Your Day Balance Game. If you type that in, you'll see an icon pop up and you'll see number of shorts and videos that really highlight the context of the coaching we do and the ways in which we work with people and what we're up to and what we're doing.
Cool. Would you mind, Anthony, just sharing like a little bit about that? Like who would that be for? The coaching that you do?
Yeah. So the coaching program that I do and I'm a part of is really geared towards helping people navigate codependency in a way that allows them to find a sense of stability, balance, and personal empowerment
Mm-hmm.
by implementing weekly and daily habits as a starting point to start to shift their sense of power, their sense of identity back towards themselves. So they give
Amazing.
themselves the um, daily deposit or daily investment back into themselves, so that over time they start to have a more fulfilled life. They feel more connected to the things they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not as um, driven off the way people how they think they're being valued by people versus how they value themselves first.
Mm-hmm. Amazing.
Yeah, and it's really great because there's so much subliminal programming on the subconscious level that has to be slowly rewired
Mm-hmm.
around like valuing yourself, caring for yourself, believing that you matter, believing that you are you are already whole and complete, and you don't have to check the box on everything before you can take a break, before you can have time for yourself, before you are um, before you've hit the mark, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
That's amazing and so valuable. I know, like for me, like I think investing into coaches and mentors has been like the best investment that I ever could have made
Oh, yeah.
throughout the last like 7, 8 years. And it's interesting because when we're kind of in that place of maybe being in the codependent state, it can be really
Mhm.
challenging to invest into ourselves where maybe we don't see the value in it. So just encouraging, if anybody's watching this and that resonates with you, don't hesitate. Just reach out and know that there's like so much help out there for you. And it's just going to accelerate everything. Like I think that's the best thing about all of it, is that it just accelerates your growth, it accelerates your learning, so you can kind of shift through things a lot quicker. And the main thing of all of it is really your self-awareness and what you're going to learn about yourself throughout the process, which is just so cool.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, we always do. People who tend to be high performers have a lot of people helping them. They get a lot of
Yeah.
feedback. And if you think about like Formula One cars, for example, this is a great analogy too. The Formula One teams, there's like hundreds of people on a team. You might just see that one driver driving the car, but they have a whole team. Just the pit crew itself is just like made up of like, 10, 15 people. Then you have the
Mhm.
sponsors. Then you have the people who work on the car. Then you have the HR. There's like companies of people who work on it year round.
Mhm.
So we're all, which just shows you that we're all in this village supportive community experience. No matter what we think, we're always in that anyway.
Mhm.
Somebody's maintaining the highways for us to drive on. Somebody's getting the food that we eat and buy at the grocery store. You
Mhm.
know, somebody is, at the counter at the movie theater or the festival. It's always a collective. It's just
Mhm.
how we see it.
Yeah, yeah. And oftentimes it's really only that main person that gets like seen. So you forget about all of the other people that are behind the scenes that are helping as well. Right. But I do believe that as well, that anybody that is like really good at what they're doing, like they have a whole team, a whole community behind them, supporting them. It,
Really
it's
do.
it's a necessity, you know?
Totally is.
What is
Totally
it?
is.
What's that thing? Like if you go alone, you might go fast, but if you go together, like you'll go far.
You go further. Yeah,
Yeah,
you go
that's
you
so
go
true.
longer too. You'll go longer and sustainably, you
Yeah,
know.
exactly. And that's I think a big thing that I've been working on is sustainability. You
Yeah.
know, like anybody can do something for one day or a short amount of time, but it's like really doing something sustainably and
Uh-huh.
integrating into like who you are is like really like, to me it's so important, and it's something that I've really been putting that importance on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how you achieve longevity, is through
Hmm.
sustainability. If you
Yeah.
can sustain, if you can stabilize it, you can sustain it. If you can sustain it, you can achieve a level of longevity in whatever you do, whether it's your health
Hmm.
or business or relationship, anything.
Hmm. Yeah. Something I wish I learned a long time ago. But here we are. That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here, Anthony. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And maybe
Pleasure.
we'll have you on again for another one at some point.
Love
That'd
to.
be amazing. And thank you to everybody who's on here listening, who's on here watching. If you guys have any questions for Anthony or anything that has came up for you as you've kind of been watching, feel free to throw them in the comments or send either of us a direct message. And we're here for you.
Cool.
Amazing. Okay. Well, bye, everybody. Thanks
Bye.
again, Anthony.
Welcome. Thank you.